Despite all the narratives, Donald Trump is gaining support among African American voters. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back again with a new video, and today we have to talk about the 2024 presidential election because Donald Trump is gaining historical levels of support among African Americans. Yeah, that's right. Despite all the Democrat copium and the media narratives surrounding Harris about how she was the second coming of Obama and she was going to win 99.9% of black voters, despite all of that, we have a brand new poll from the NAACP, which is not a far-right organization, far from it. Well, they conducted a survey a month ago, and funny enough, they waited all this time to release the results of the survey. I mean, seriously, you waited a whole month to release these results? Well, they waited all this time because it was bad for Harris, and they tried to spin it as good news for her, when in reality, no, this was a complete disaster. Because according to the survey, Harris is only winning 63% of the black vote. That's not a typo, that's not a misquote. 63% of the black vote is going to Harris, while Trump is getting 13% of the black vote. Yeah. Despite Kamala Harris being the second coming of Obama and that she was going to win 98% of the black vote, despite all of that, in reality, according to a survey of 1,000 black voters, we're not talking about a survey of 100 or even 200. This is 1,000 African-American voters that they polled. And they found Harris was only getting 63% of the black vote, while Trump's at 13%. Now, it's entirely possible that with all these undecideds, it's like, 25% undecided or whatever it is. It's entirely possible that the majority of these undecideds, they break for Harris. I'm not denying that. But do you really think every single undecided black voter is gonna break for Harris? Now, it's entirely possible that Harris wins these undecided voters, which I think she will. But there's a bunch of problems with this theory. For starters, do you really think she's gonna win every single one of them? Again, I can expect, I would say a super majority of these undecideds, they're probably going to break for Harris at the end of the day. But the problem for her is, well, that still means like 20 to 30% of these voters, they're going to break for Trump. And if that's the case, you're talking about Trump possibly cracking 16, 17, 18, 19, hell, possibly 20% of the vote if that happens. Again, I'm not saying that's for sure going to happen, but do you see the problem? Even if it's like a 70-30 split, you're talking about Trump doubling his vote share from 2020. So that's the biggest problem, even if these undecideds are super Harris, which I think they will, but even if it's 70-30, that would still be a complete disaster for Kamala Harris. For those that don't believe me, back in 2016, Trump only got roughly 6% of the black vote. In 2020, it was around 8%. So from 2016 to 2020, he got 6 to 8%. Some polls had it 10%. Hell, there were a couple that actually had him at 12%. But let's just say fine. The average was 8% of the black vote went to Trump back in 2020. Maybe a little bit higher, but let's just say 8 to 10%. If Trump is really getting 15, 16, 17, 18% of the black vote, like this poll suggests when you include undecided voters, Trump would be doubling his vote share from 2020. Now, when you dig into the numbers even further, you realize, oh wait, this could be an even bigger problem for Harris than we originally expected. Look at the second paragraph. 26% of black men under the age of 50 said they supported Trump, versus 49% who backed Harris. Yeah, that's not a misquote. Harris isn't even winning a majority of young black men. That's not a misquote, that's not a typo, that's what the survey found. And this is 1,000 African-American voters that they surveyed. Yet they couldn't get Harris above 50%. She's barely at 49%, while Trump's at 26%. For black men above the age of 50, 77% said they supported Harris. So there's really a big gap between younger black voters and older black voters. And this can be seen especially with black men. Black men that are under the age of 50, even in 2020, there was a big shift towards Trump with these voters. But it seems like the trends within this group, it's accelerating. They're becoming more Trump friendly by each passing day. Despite Kamala Harris becoming the Democrat nominee, these black men that are under the age of 50, they're still voting for Trump at extremely high rates, while Harris is not even cracking 50%. So you notice that, wait, a large chunk of these undecided voters, they are young black men, which they are the most pro-Trump group of these voters. That's a fact. Younger black men are super pro-Trump, especially compared to even older black men. Older black men, they're way more pro-Harris. Which, like I said, we saw this trend back in 2020 where younger black voters, especially younger black men, they trended heavily towards Trump. While older black men, they kind of stay the same. They might have shifted 1 point Republican at most, but we saw the biggest shift with young black men. And for those that don't get why that's happening, it really comes down to the fact that the older black voters, they remember the Democrat Party passing the Civil Rights Act back in the 60s. And ever since then, they have been a super Democrat group, like 95% Democrat. But with each passing generation, the impact of the Civil Rights Act becomes less and less impactful. I mean, seriously, if you grew up in the 60s, yeah, that's a big issue for you. But do you think a black voter in the year of 2024 that was born in the late 90s, do you really think they are that impacted by the Civil Rights Act? I'm just being serious. I don't think they care that much compared to someone that's, 80 years old. Now, I know some of you might be asking yourselves, why is this a big deal? Who really cares if Trump's getting 15 or 16% of the black vote? Why does this really matter? Because we all know that black voters, they make up 12 to 13% of the vote. Most cycles, it's like 10 to 13%, somewhere in that range. Why is it a big deal? Well, put it simply, if Trump is really doubling his support among black voters, for starters, Harris has a big problem. Because her pathway to the presidency runs through a state like Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, even North Carolina. And those states, especially if you're a Democrat, relies heavily on African-American voters, voting like 95% Democrat. Even if there's only a 5-point swing, let's just be friendly and say, instead of a 15-point swing, it's a 5-point swing. Well, that could be the difference between a Trump win in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, even Wisconsin, or a Harris victory. That's why a swing of this magnitude, if it's really, a 15 to 20-point shift, which I still have questions about, but if this is real, well, states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, even Wisconsin, for Harris becomes much more difficult to win. If that's not including the fact that early voting in North Carolina, which I know it's not really a swing state compared to Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, but Democrats think, we can flip North Carolina this time. Problem is, black turnout, at least when it comes to absentee requests, are way down. And it gets worse each passing day. In 2020, they were roughly 18% of the vote. Right now, they're only 11%. So you're talking about a double whammy. Democrats are not seeing this enthusiasm surge with black voters in reality, which is not what Harris wanted. In fact, Harris was banking on the idea that, black voters are going to vote in droves. They're going to have record high turnout, and that's how we're going to win. Problem is, we're not seeing that as of now. And on top of that, look at this poll from not a right-wing organization. It's a decent-sized poll, and they found Trump doubling his support among African Americans. So turnout with these voters are way down, but not only that, you're seeing a big swing towards Trump. If this really happens where turnout's even down by 1%, you compare this to 2020 where the black vote was roughly 11% of the electorate. If it's 10 or even 9% of the vote, Harris is cooked. Harris is absolutely cooked at that point, especially if there's a 10 to 15 point shift towards Trump with these voters. That's a double whammy. you not only have less black voters actually voting, but the share of them actually voting for you is going down by 10 to 15%. And like I said, you look at the electoral map, a state like Georgia, the entire pathway to victory through Georgia relies on the black vote. Well, if turnout's down with them, you're cooked there. Same thing in North Carolina, same thing in Philly, same thing in Michigan. Hell, even Wisconsin, you could argue a reason Biden won back in 2020 was because black turnout in Milwaukee was way up. And if it wasn't for that, it would have been a close race. And I know they only make up like 6 to 7% of the vote, but if you max out those voters in Milwaukee, if you're a Democrat, that's all you need. In the year of 2024, if you max out black turnout in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, you still got to do other things, but your pathway to winning becomes a lot easier. But if these voters are shifting against you and they're not even voting, well, your pathway to winning in Wisconsin becomes a lot less likely. You start adding all of this up, you realize, oh, this is a big deal because it's not just a shift towards Trump. It's a collapse in turnout, which there's a chance that the turnout can get back up to normal, within a day or so, I guess. But right now, turnout's way down. Black voters are shifting towards Trump. And there's a chance that Trump's vote share with black voters, it could be way higher than this poll even suggests. There's a lot of variables to this, I get that, but the Democrat Party did not want to see these numbers at all, especially with Kamala Harris. I mean, your entire strategy was bring back the Obama 2012 coalition, max out black turnout, win 95% of them, and you win the election. That was their strategy. But right now, this poll from the NAACP, which not a right-wing organization, is far from it, they found Trump getting good numbers with these voters, while Harris is barely cracking 60%. And there's a chance when you allocate undecideds, it's closer to 15, 16, 17, maybe even 20% for Trump. Again, I'm not saying that's my prediction, but these are not good numbers for Democrats whatsoever. Which, by the way, I still don't get why the Hill tried to spin this as good. Yeah, that's right. The Hill was claiming that Harris getting 63% of the black vote was good news for her. What? 63% for any Democrat, let alone Kamala Harris, is a complete disaster. She should be at the bare minimum 85% right now with like 10% undecided. Not, oh yeah, she's at 63, Trump's at 13, there's like 25% undecided, and those undecided voters, they look a lot more pro-Trump than one would expect. This is not good for Harris, and if this keeps up, which I know it's only one poll, but I find it fascinating that the one big survey among black voters shows a disaster for Harris. Well, it makes you really wonder, is this just a fluke? Is this a trend? Is this what's happening? We gotta see what happens, but if Trump is really doing this good with black voters and Harris is doing this bad with them, I really don't see how Trump can lose. Is it possible? Yes. You could argue, well, Trump could do way worse with white voters, which I don't think that's going to happen, but it's possible. But if Trump is really doing this much better with black voters, it's not looking good for Harris whatsoever. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.